She announced a sudden wellness retreat to Lake Tahoe, but I'd never heard her mention these sorority sisters before or show any interest in meditation. 3 years of living together, and Stephanie had never once talked about staying in touch with college friends or wanting to do yoga retreats. I'm an industrial automation engineer, so I notice patterns and inconsistencies. It's literally what I do for a living. When someone who spends weekends binge-watching reality TV suddenly decides she needs a spiritual cleansing weekend with friends she's never mentioned, my analytical mind starts asking questions. I approached it casually, asking about the retreat location and which friends would be joining her. Her response immediately raised red flags in my systematic thinking. She became defensive, asking if I couldn't just trust her, while providing vague details that kept shifting each time I brought up the topic. One day she mentioned staying at a lakeside resort, the next day it was camping cabins, then back to a spa hotel. The friends' names changed too. First it was Ashley and Morgan, then Jessica and someone whose name she couldn't quite remember. I noticed other changes in her behavior over the past month that my engineering brain couldn't ignore. Stephanie had become secretive about her phone, taking it everywhere including the bathroom and angling the screen away when texting. She'd started working late more frequently at her marketing firm, coming home with elaborate explanations about client presentations that seemed unnecessarily detailed. Most telling was how often she mentioned Chris, a new colleague who apparently had fascinating insights about everything from coffee shops to weekend plans. I found expensive lingerie hidden in her dresser drawer, still with tags attached, pieces she'd never worn during our intimate moments together. When I discovered a deleted text thread on our shared laptop mentioning weekend getaway and finally some alone time, I realized I was looking at evidence of something that had nothing to do with sorority sisters or wellness activities. Despite every logical indicator pointing toward deception, I told Stephanie I absolutely trusted her and fully supported her weekend away, encouraging her to enjoy the time with her friends and promising to take care of everything at home while she focused on her spiritual renewal. While Stephanie finalized her retreat plans, I discreetly contacted my friend Jake, a private investigator who owed me a favor from when I automated his office security system. Within 24 hours, Jake confirmed that no wellness retreats were scheduled at Lake Tahoe that weekend, and the resort Stephanie mentioned didn't exist in any travel database. I felt a cold satisfaction knowing my analytical instincts had been correct, but also a deep sadness realizing our 3-year relationship was built on lies I'd been too trusting to see. I started systematically photographing our shared belongings, documenting which furniture I'd purchased, which appliances were mine, and creating detailed inventories of everything I legally owned in our apartment. My engineering training in project management made this process methodical and thorough. I approached it like decommissioning a complex system that needed to be dismantled piece by piece. I began researching moving companies, apartment listings in the downtown area, and storage facilities while maintaining my normal routine to avoid raising Stephanie's suspicion. During lunch breaks, I toured 3 different loft apartments and put a deposit down on a spacious unit with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows that represented the fresh start I suddenly realized I needed. I quietly opened my own bank account at a different institution and started transferring my personal funds while documenting Stephanie's minimal financial contributions to our shared expenses over the past year. The math was depressing. I'd been covering roughly 70% of our living costs while she spent her marketing coordinator salary on clothes, dinners with friends, and apparently gifts for her affair partner. I contacted my best friend Marcus, who owns a moving company, explaining the situation and asking him to arrange a complete apartment clearing for the weekend Stephanie would be away. Marcus, who'd never particularly liked Stephanie's entitled attitude, immediately agreed to help and promised to bring his most efficient crew for a rapid relocation operation. I also began the administrative process of extraction, forwarding my mail to a P.O. box, updating my address with my employer, insurance companies, and utilities, and researching the legal requirements for removing my name from our lease agreement. Every evening, I sat across from Stephanie at dinner, listening to her elaborate on her weekend wellness plans while knowing she was describing a romantic getaway with another man. The cognitive dissonance was surreal, watching someone I'd loved and trusted for 3 years construct an intricate lie while looking directly into my eyes and asking if I thought she needed to pack yoga pants or hiking boots for her fictional retreat. I realized I was experiencing the end of our relationship in real time, conducting a controlled demolition of our shared life while she remained completely unaware of the systematic dismantling happening around her. My engineering background had taught me that failed systems need complete replacement rather than partial repairs, and I applied that same logic to removing myself entirely from a relationship that had become structurally unsound. The most difficult part wasn't the logistical planning or even the emotional pain of betrayal. It was maintaining normal conversations about weekend grocery shopping and utility bills while internally coordinating the complete erasure of my presence from her life. I found myself studying Stephanie with detached curiosity, wondering how someone could compartmentalize deception so effectively while still discussing our shared Netflix queue and asking me to pick up her dry cleaning. By Thursday evening, 48 hours before her departure, I had arranged every detail of my disappearance with military precision, feeling like a demolition expert preparing to bring down a building that had been condemned by structural failure. Stephanie left Friday morning with an overnight bag, kissing me goodbye and promising to text updates about the retreat activities, while I noted she was dressed more for a romantic getaway than a wellness weekend. She wore the black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary, expensive perfume, and heels that seemed impractical for hiking or yoga sessions. I watched her drive away in her sedan, knowing I'd never see her return to our shared apartment as my girlfriend. Within an hour of her departure, Jake sent me photographic evidence that confirmed everything I'd suspected. Stephanie had checked into a luxury couples resort in Napa Valley with Chris from her marketing firm, and the photos showed them embracing in the hotel lobby like established lovers rather than new affair partners. I stared at the images on my phone, feeling a strange mixture of vindication and profound sadness that our 3-year relationship had been reduced to evidence in a private investigator's case file. I immediately called Marcus, who arrived within 2 hours with his most experienced moving crew, 3 guys who treated the situation with professional efficiency and surprising emotional support. Marcus had brought industrial-strength moving supplies, furniture dollies, and a truck large enough to handle my entire life in one trip. They worked with systematic precision through Friday afternoon and evening, carefully packing my electronics, books, clothing, and the furniture I'd purchased during our relationship. I directed them to take the leather sectional sofa I'd saved 6 months to buy, the dining room table and chairs I'd assembled myself, the expensive mattress and bed frame, my home office setup including the standing desk and ergonomic chair, and all the kitchen appliances I'd gradually upgraded over the past 2 years. We removed my 65-inch wall-mounted television that I'd bought for our anniversary, leaving behind the mounting bracket as a subtle reminder of what she'd lost. The moving crew was impressed by my detailed inventory lists and pre-planned packing strategy, commenting that most people took weeks to organize what I'd systematized in days. I canceled my name from the lease agreement, utilities, and shared streaming services while documenting everything for potential legal purposes, ensuring Stephanie would face the full financial reality of our apartment without my contributions. By Friday evening, Marcus and his crew had loaded everything into their truck, and I conducted a final walkthrough of the space that had been our home, feeling like I was inspecting a completed demolition project. I left behind only Stephanie's belongings, her furniture from before we moved in together, and the cheap decorative items she'd accumulated. The apartment looked sparse and sad without my contributions, like a movie set after the crew had removed all the important props. I also canceled the grocery delivery service, the premium cable package, and the monthly cleaning service, all subscriptions I'd been paying that she'd probably forgotten weren't automatic parts of apartment living. The last task was placing a single note on the kitchen counter where she'd definitely see it, positioned next to her coffee maker like a formal business communication. I wrote in my neat engineering handwriting that I absolutely trusted her and hoped her wellness retreat was everything she needed, adding that she shouldn't contact me. As we locked the apartment for the final time, I felt an unexpected sense of liberation rather than loss, realizing I was escaping a relationship that had been slowly draining my emotional and financial resources without providing genuine partnership in return. By Saturday morning, I had completely vanished from the apartment, establishing myself in a spacious downtown loft that felt like entering a different world entirely. The exposed brick walls, industrial lighting, and floor-to-ceiling windows created an atmosphere of possibility that I hadn't experienced in years of living in our beige suburban apartment with its generic furniture and suffocating routine. I spent Saturday organizing my belongings in my new space, setting up my home office with the automation equipment I'd been unable to properly display in our shared living room, and programming smart home systems that turn my loft into a showcase of my engineering capabilities. The silence was remarkable, no reality television background noise, no complaints about my work equipment taking up too much space, no requests for money disguised as relationship discussions about our future. I realized I'd been living in a constant state of low-level stress, always accommodating someone else's preferences and financial needs while gradually abandoning my own interests and goals. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with cheerful but completely fabricated texts from Stephanie describing yoga sessions and meditation workshops while she was actually enjoying romantic dinners and couples massages with Chris at their luxury Napa resort. The cognitive dissonance of receiving messages about finding inner peace while knowing she was betraying our relationship made me appreciate the clean finality of my disappearance strategy. I blocked her number on Saturday afternoon, changed all my passwords, and updated my social media settings to prevent her from tracking my activities or location. The downtown neighborhood offered everything I'd missed during our relationship: walkable coffee shops run by actual artisans rather than corporate chains, bookstores with technical sections that didn't make me feel like a nerd, and restaurants where I could eat alone without feeling like I was failing at some relationship obligation. I spent Saturday evening exploring my new area, discovering a photography supply store, a craft brewery that hosted engineering meetups, and a gym with rock climbing walls that I'd always wanted to try but never could because Stephanie thought athletic activities were boring unless they involved expensive equipment and Instagram opportunities. My loft came partially furnished, but I arranged my own furniture to create distinct zones for work, relaxation, and hobbies that had been impossible in our cramped shared space where everything revolved around her entertainment preferences and social media aesthetic. I set up my technical books on proper shelving, arranged my computer equipment for optimal functionality rather than hiding it to maintain living room appearances, and created a workspace where I could pursue the automation consulting business I'd been planning but never had space or time to develop. The financial freedom was immediate and dramatic. Without Stephanie's constant expenses, I could actually see my savings account growing rather than mysteriously depleting every month due to her shopping habits, restaurant preferences, and recurring emergencies that always required my financial intervention. Sunday morning, I woke up in my own space for the first time in 3 years, made coffee without someone complaining about the brand or brewing method, and spent 2 hours reading technical journals while classical music played at whatever volume I preferred. Stephanie returned Sunday evening to find the apartment completely stripped of my presence, initially thinking they'd been robbed until she discovered my note and realized the devastating truth of what had happened during her deceptive weekend away. According to Marcus, who heard from mutual friends, she spent 20 minutes walking through the empty rooms, calling my name and checking closets as if I might be hiding somewhere, before the reality of my systematic disappearance finally registered. She frantically called my number dozens of times, leaving increasingly hysterical voicemails that ranged from confused questions to angry accusations to desperate pleas for explanation, but all calls went straight to voicemail since I'd blocked her number before she even returned from Napa. I listened to exactly one voicemail through a secondary phone app, hearing her voice crack as she demanded to know how I could disappear without warning after 3 years together, apparently unable to connect my absence with her own betrayal. The irony was remarkable. She accused me of abandoning her without communication while she'd spent the weekend lying about her location and activities. Her friends and family, who had always liked my stability and thoughtfulness, began questioning her about what had happened, forcing her to confront the reality that she needed to explain why her loving boyfriend of 3 years had suddenly vanished without warning. She couldn't tell them the truth about her affair without exposing her own deception, but she also couldn't fabricate a believable story about why someone as reliable as me would disappear mysteriously. I heard through our mutual friend network that she contacted the police to report a possible break-in, describing how all my belongings and furniture had vanished while she was away, but the responding officers quickly determined this was a planned relocation rather than a crime. The police apparently found my note, recognized the signs of a relationship ending rather than criminal activity, and told her this was a civil matter beyond their jurisdiction, leaving Stephanie with no legal recourse for my disappearance. Her weekend with Chris suddenly felt hollow and meaningless as she realized she traded a genuine partnership for a shallow affair that had never been intended as anything serious or long-term. Chris, according to Jake's continued surveillance at my request, seemed uncomfortable with Stephanie's sudden availability and emotional neediness, having been attracted to the excitement of a secret relationship rather than the responsibility of an actual commitment. I spent Sunday evening in my loft, assembling furniture and programming my smart home systems while Stephanie was presumably discovering the full scope of what she'd lost through her deception. The contrast was striking. I was building something new and personally meaningful while she was confronting the wreckage of what she'd destroyed through her choices. Marcus called to report that Stephanie had contacted him, begging for my new address and phone number, offering to pay him for information about my location, but he'd refused and blocked her number as well. The desperation in her attempts to reach me confirmed that she finally understood the permanence of my departure and the impossibility of undoing the consequences of her betrayal. I felt a cold satisfaction knowing that my engineering approach to relationship termination had been executed flawlessly, leaving her with no way to manipulate, guilt, or convince me to reconsider my decision. Stephanie discovered that I'd removed my name from all shared financial responsibilities, leaving her solely responsible for the full rent, utilities, and streaming services that she couldn't afford on her marketing coordinator salary alone. The apartment that had cost us $2,400 monthly was now entirely her burden, along with electricity, internet, cable, and the premium subscriptions I'd been covering without her apparently realizing the total monthly expense exceeded her take-home pay. Marcus heard through mutual friends that she'd spent her first week back calling utility companies and landlords, trying to understand how our shared finances had been structured and discovering that my contributions had been subsidizing a lifestyle completely beyond her individual means. Her affair with Chris quickly crumbled when he realized she was now single and available, revealing he'd only been interested in the excitement of a secret relationship rather than the responsibility of supporting someone through a difficult transition. Chris apparently stopped responding to her texts within days of her breakup becoming public knowledge, leaving her to face the financial and emotional consequences of her choices completely alone. Mutual friends began choosing sides when they learned about Stephanie's infidelity, with most supporting my dignified exit strategy and distancing themselves from her deceptive behavior. Our friend group had always respected my reliability and straightforwardness, so when the truth emerged about her weekend lies and affair, they viewed my disappearance as justified rather than cruel. I heard that several people had suspected something was wrong in our relationship based on how she'd been treating me in recent months, making demands while contributing little and constantly comparing me unfavorably to other men. She was forced to move back with her parents after being unable to afford the apartment alone, which meant relocating 40 minutes outside the city and explaining to her family why her seemingly perfect relationship had suddenly ended in such dramatic fashion. Her parents had always liked me, appreciating how I'd supported their daughter and treated her with consistent respect, so Stephanie faced uncomfortable questions about what had gone wrong and why I'd left without giving her a chance to explain or reconcile. The humiliation of moving back home at 26, after 3 years of living independently with a stable partner, compounded her realization of what she'd lost through her deceptive choices and unrealistic expectations. I heard through Jake's ongoing information network that she'd been forced to sell some of her designer belongings to cover moving expenses and the security deposit her parents required, finally experiencing the direct financial consequences of prioritizing expensive possessions over genuine relationships. My complete disappearance became legendary among our social circle as the perfect example of how to handle a cheating partner with class and finality, inspiring conversations about self-respect and appropriate responses to betrayal. Several people reached out to me directly, expressing admiration for my clean exit strategy and sharing their own experiences with partners who'd taken their loyalty for granted until it was permanently withdrawn. The story spread beyond our immediate friend group, becoming a cautionary tale about honesty in relationships and the importance of appreciating genuine partnership before it disappears. I thrived in my downtown loft, using my engineering skills to design smart home automation systems that became a profitable side business, while also joining hiking groups and photography clubs that introduced me to genuine people who shared my interests rather than viewing me as a financial resource. The automation consulting work grew organically through word-of-mouth referrals, allowing me to supplement my regular income while pursuing technically challenging projects that utilized my expertise in ways my day job never had. I rediscovered hobbies I'd abandoned during my relationship with Stephanie, spending weekends exploring nature photography locations and learning advanced hiking techniques with people who appreciated technical discussions about equipment and methodology. 6 months later, I met Jennifer, an environmental scientist, at a nature photography workshop where we bonded over our shared fascination with documenting natural systems and our analytical approaches to creative pursuits. Jennifer had her own career, financial independence, and intellectual curiosity that made our conversations stimulating rather than draining, and she actually contributed ideas to my automation projects instead of treating my work as boring technical nonsense. We developed a relationship built on honesty, shared passions, and mutual respect that made me realize how unhappy I had been with Stephanie's constant demands and emotional manipulation disguised as relationship needs. Jennifer appreciated my methodical approach to life, finding my planning and preparation habits reassuring rather than controlling, and she contributed equally to our shared expenses without making it feel like a negotiation or favor. The contrast was remarkable. Where Stephanie had seen my stability as boring, Jennifer valued it as the foundation for building something meaningful together, and where Stephanie had treated my financial contributions as entitlements, Jennifer insisted on maintaining her own independence while building genuine partnership. Meanwhile, Stephanie struggled with trust issues in future relationships, as her reputation for infidelity followed her in our social circles, and she found herself repeatedly having to explain why her long-term relationship had ended so dramatically and mysteriously. I heard through mutual connections that potential partners would eventually learn about how she treated me, creating skepticism about her character and reliability that made developing new relationships increasingly difficult. Her dating life became a series of short-term connections with men who either didn't want commitment or lost interest once they understood her pattern of deception and financial dependency on previous partners. I never contacted Stephanie again, maintaining my complete no-contact policy, which became a powerful statement about self-respect and the consequences of betrayal that resonated with everyone who knew our story. The discipline of never reaching out, never checking her social media, and never responding to her attempts to contact me through mutual friends demonstrated a level of commitment to my own boundaries that impressed people and reinforced my reputation for integrity. A year later, Jennifer and I moved in together, combining our technical expertise to create a home that reflected both our personalities and professional interests, with her environmental monitoring equipment complementing my automation systems in ways that felt like genuine collaboration rather than accommodation. The story of my disappearance became a cautionary tale among our friends about honesty in relationships, with my perfect execution of the exit strategy inspiring others to prioritize their own self-worth and refuse to tolerate deception or take advantage of partners who viewed them as convenient rather than valuable.